So picture this. It's a scenario that is probably way too familiar to all of us. You finally carve out an hour of free time. You clear off your desk, you sit down in your chair, and you get ready to do that deep, meaningful work you've literally been thinking about for days. You open your laptop, but within 3 minutes, you've somehow opened 4 different browser tabs, you're checking messages, you're randomly reading a news headline, and you're just feeling completely, entirely scattered. It's this painful, deeply frustrating feeling, right? You desperately want to focus. You really want to do the work, but your mind just feels like a swarm of bees, buzzing around with all this nervous energy. You're sitting there, looking for the door to deep focus, but you just keep running into walls. And this brings us to a really fundamental question. Why won't the mind stay still? We so often blame ourselves when we can't focus. We think, oh, I just lack discipline, or that our willpower is somehow fundamentally broken. But the truth is actually much deeper, and honestly, a whole lot more forgiving. You see, the default state of the human mind is restless. Left entirely to its own devices, our attention is biologically designed to constantly jump around. It scans the environment for danger, it worries about tomorrow's schedule, it rehashes that super awkward conversation you had yesterday, and it anxiously anticipates future outcomes. This is literally a survival mechanism. The mind is naturally inclined toward a state of internal disorder, a kind of protective chaos, unless it is given a very specific, incredibly compelling reason to settle down.
Think about someone who sits down wanting to write a chapter of a novel, or maybe practice the guitar, or write some code. They have the absolute best intentions. But instead of actually entering the task, their attention just deeply fragments. They check their messages, they open a new tab to look up one quick fact, and then, suddenly, they're 10 minutes deep into reading about something entirely unrelated. But you know, the true cost here isn't even just the lost time. It's the sheer exhaustion of that internal tug of war. Because then comes the self-judgment, that harsh, critical internal voice asking, why can't I just concentrate? They start worrying about the household tasks they haven't finished, or stressing about whether the work they are trying to do right now will even be good enough. They remain completely unable to truly enter the activity because their attention is being pulled in 5 different directions all at once. And the emotional weight of this fragmentation is just draining. It leaves a person feeling fatigued before the real work has even begun.
Now, this scattered reality highlights a pretty profound misunderstanding we have about how attention actually works. We often assume that deep focus, that highly coveted, deeply absorbing state we call flow, is something we just have to force through sheer grueling willpower. Or worse, we kind of think it's just a stroke of luck that magically strikes us on good days, leaving us entirely at its mercy. But it's neither. Flow is not forced by willpower alone. It is supported by the right conditions. Deep focus is an incredibly accessible state, but it only happens when we deliberately align specific elements in our environment and our minds. We can't just sit there and demand focus. We have to deliberately design the space for our attention to land safely.
Let's look at how we do that. Section 1. The clear goal. To stop the mind from its default restless wandering, it desperately needs a destination. Our consciousness enters an activity much more easily when it knows exactly, without any ambiguity whatsoever, what it is trying to achieve in that specific moment.
Consider the massive difference between a vague intention and a concrete next step. A vague intention is something like telling yourself, okay, I want to write a good essay today, or I need to study. That framing is just far too broad. It leaves way too much room for the mind to drift, to feel overwhelmed, and to basically negotiate its way right out of doing the work. Now contrast that with a concrete next step. This sounds more like, I am going to write the opening paragraph about the French Revolution, or I am going to fix this one specific line of broken code. That concrete, highly visible next step gives your consciousness the exact, sturdy architecture it needs to safely settle down. Because here is the undeniable reality of our psychology. Without a clear next step, the mind quickly becomes restless. If you sit down at your desk and simply think, okay, it's time to work, your brain immediately starts searching for easier, more immediately rewarding things to do. It's actively looking for an escape route from that ambiguity. But when you define the exact, microscopic next action, you instantly close the door on all those other distracting options. You give your attention a very specific, narrow path to walk down, completely eliminating the burden of choice.
Now for Section 2, the power of immediate feedback. Setting a clear goal gets you started, for sure, but how do you stay deeply absorbed? Well, you stay engaged when you receive constant, immediate feedback. Your attention locks in when you know, second by second, whether your current action is actually working.
Just think about the everyday activities that naturally hold our attention. Playing a musical instrument, solving a really complex jigsaw puzzle, rigorously editing a sentence, cooking a demanding meal, or playing a highly active sport like tennis.
Why are these activities so incredibly absorbing? It's because they have built-in, instantaneous feedback loops. When you hit the wrong note on a piano, you hear it immediately. When you chop a vegetable perfectly, you see it right then and there. When you hit a tennis ball, you instantly know if it landed inside the white lines or went out of bounds. This constant, immediate stream of information, yes, that worked, or no, adjust that slightly, anchors your mind firmly and securely in the present moment. Your attention literally does not have the spare capacity to wander off into yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's anxieties.
Moving on to Section 3, balancing challenge and skill. Deep focus requires a very delicate, intentional intersection between how difficult a task is and the specific skills we bring to it at that exact moment in our lives.
Imagine the relationship between the challenges we face and the skills we possess. If you're doing something where the challenge is vastly higher than your current abilities, let's say you're trying to play a highly complex piece of classical music on your very first day of piano lessons, you are instantly pushed into a state of anxiety. It is simply too hard. You panic, your body tenses up, and your focus completely shatters. Conversely, if you're doing something where your skills far outweigh the challenge, like a seasoned programmer writing basic, repetitive boilerplate code all day long, you fall into a state of deep boredom. Your mind isn't stimulated, so it naturally scatters, searching the room or the internet to find some entertainment elsewhere. The magic happens right in the middle, in this narrow diagonal channel between those two extremes. That boundary between anxiety and boredom. A person enters a state of flow, right at that delicate boundary line. The task must be difficult enough to command all of your attention, requiring you to stretch your abilities just a little bit past what feels entirely comfortable. But it absolutely must remain manageable enough to prevent you from feeling overwhelmed. When you find that perfect match, a manageable, slightly stretching challenge perfectly paired with your level of skill, your mind just locks in. It is deeply, profoundly satisfying.
Which brings us to Section 4, the filtered environment. Even if you have the perfect challenge, the right skills, clear goals, and immediate feedback, there is still one more massive hurdle. We have to address the absolute necessity of reducing irrelevant input. Because honestly, even with all the right internal conditions perfectly aligned, our focus remains incredibly fragile to the noise of the outside world.
This brings us to a deeply fascinating concept known as psychic entropy. It's defined as a state of internal disorder in consciousness caused by conflicting information or distractions. And this beautifully validates why a buzzing phone, the urge to artificially multitask, or even constant self-monitoring just completely destroys our capacity for deep work. When a notification pops up while you're trying to read a difficult text, it isn't just a minor annoyance, it actually introduces conflicting reality into your brain. Your attention is suddenly pulled in too many directions, creating immediate disorder. The delicate, harmonious structure of your focus just collapses right into psychic entropy.
There's this fantastic idea that the optimal state of inner experience is one in which there is order in consciousness. But what does that actually feel like in practice? Imagine the sheer physical relief of a person who finally becomes completely absorbed in their work. Why are they absorbed? Because their phone is in another room entirely. Their immediate goal is crystal clear. The highly visible next step is right in front of them. And because of all that, the crippling anxiety about the final outcome is completely silenced. They aren't forcing their mind to stay still anymore through gritted teeth. Their mind has naturally, quietly settled because they have curated absolute order in their environment.
So let's bring it all together. Section 5, Finding Flow in Daily Life. Let's shift our perspective for a minute and look at some gentle, highly practical ways to intentionally design these flow conditions in our everyday routines. Because this isn't just some philosophical concept reserved for elite athletes, master musicians, or brilliant artists. It is a framework for everyday living. You can invite flow into almost any mundane task by actively shaping the conditions around your attention. If you're cooking a meal, don't just passively chop vegetables while watching a distracting video on your phone. Make it a flow activity. Set a deliberate goal for the perfect dice, pay close attention to the immediate sensory feedback of the knife hitting the cutting board, and really find the rhythm of the work. Or, if you're spending time with a child, put the phone away entirely to remove that psychic entropy. Set a shared goal, like building a really complex tower of blocks together, and ensure the challenge matches their developing skills so they don't get frustrated. Whether it's studying, tackling deep work, or just practicing a weekend hobby, if you carefully build the architecture, your mind will step through the door.
And this brings us to a really profound realization. Flow is not about escaping life. So often we use our glowing screens, our endless browser tabs, and our constant buzzing distractions as a way to numb out.
We use them to run away from our responsibilities, to avoid the heavy weight of the world, or just to silence our anxieties. But deep absorption is the exact opposite of running away. Numbing is an escape from reality. Flow, on the other hand, is running deeply toward it.
It is about creating enough order for the mind to fully enter one thing. That is the deeper truth we've explored today. Flow isn't magic. It doesn't happen just because we wish for it really hard or punish ourselves for failing to concentrate. It simply requires structuring our attention so that we can fully and harmoniously participate in the present moment, whatever that moment happens to be. So, the crucial question I want to leave you with today is simply this: how will you structure your attention today? The next time you sit down at your desk and feel that painful, familiar scattering of your mind, remember that you do not need to punish yourself. Your mind is just doing what it naturally does. You just need to build the right conditions for it. Find your clear, immediate goal. Seek out instantaneous feedback. Balance your challenge with your current skills and ruthlessly filter out the entropic noise of the world. Build the conditions and find the door.